everybody. So today I want to take a look at a team that I really think could be a dark horse in the NHL this year. A team that could possibly make the playoffs and really surpass most people's expectations for how good they're going to be this season. And that team is the Los Angeles Kings. In this video, I'm going to talk about some reasons why I think the Kings could be this dark horse, and also look at the other side of the equation and talk about some questions that still remain and some things that could hold them back from being that team this year. So before we get into it, I just ask you to please subscribe and hit that thumbs up. It helps the channel a ton and is greatly appreciated. But let's get started. Before we get into this coming season, I want to take a look back on last year for the Kings, where they didn't have a great year. They were a very mediocre team in 2020-2021. They went 21-28-7 for 49 points, had a minus 27 goal differential, and finished 6th in the Pacific Division. Obviously not a very good team, below average, and it wasn't a great year for LA. Although them still being in a rebuild, this wasn't exactly unexpected. They really struggled offensively, scoring just 2.54 goals for per game, which was 27th in the NHL. That is an area that they absolutely need to improve on this season, just overall offense and goal scoring. They were pretty mediocre defensively as well, giving up 3.02 goals against per game, which was 21st in the league. Their power play was below average at 18.9%, which was 19th in the NHL. I guess really the lone phase of the game that was a bright spot for the Kings was their penalty kill, which was actually very good at 83.7%, which was tied for 6th in the league. So that's an area that was actually good for the Kings. But overall, it was not a great season last year, and they were still very much in a rebuild and still very much a struggling team. However, I think that can change this season, and there are a number of reasons why, and that's what we're going to get into here. All right, so there are a few different reasons why I think that the Kings could really surprise people this year, be a big-time dark horse team, and possibly make the playoffs. And the first is that they play in the Pacific Division, and the Pacific Division is going to be bad this year. Definitely the worst out of the 4 divisions. And look at the other teams. How many mediocre teams are there in the Pacific? How many big question marks are there in the Pacific? I mean, obviously you have Vegas, and even Vegas, I think, has taken a step back this offseason. It's still their division to lose, however, just because there's really no other team even close to that level. And then you have, what else? Edmonton, heavily reliant on McDavid and Draisaitl. If one of those guys gets injured, their entire season could tank. I don't think their defense is very good. And Mike Smith in goal, can he really repeat what he did last year? If not, Edmonton's in big trouble. So there's a ton of questions with the Oilers. Calgary Flames, I think, are an extremely mediocre team. Huge question marks there. Vancouver Canucks, massive question marks there. Are they going to be the 2020 Vancouver Canucks, or are they going to be the 2021 Vancouver Canucks? Huge difference in those two teams. If they get back to being the 2020 Canucks, Vancouver could be a really, really good team. If they play like they did last season, they're going to have another horrible year. Seattle, obviously, massive question mark coming into the league. First season, we have no real idea what to expect from them. Judging by their roster, they're probably going to be pretty good defensively, but have a lot of problems scoring goals. And then you have San Jose and Anaheim, who are probably going to be the 2 worst teams in the division and 2 of the worst teams in the entire league. So outside of Vegas, who I think is, pretty secure as a playoff team, you've got a whole bunch of questions after that and a whole bunch of mediocre hockey teams. So if the Kings are one of the better of the mediocre teams, they could sneak into a playoff spot in 3rd or 4th in that division rather easily. So the division that they're in definitely helps the Los Angeles Kings because the Pacific is not very good at all. They also made some major additions this offseason, adding Philip Deneau in free agency, who's going to come in and be a very good two-way center for the Kings as he's been throughout his entire career. And they traded for Victor Arvidsson earlier in the offseason to try and bring another scoring winger in there and again try and improve this team's offense, which was such a big problem for them last year. Now, there's no question that Danault and Arvidsson both are coming off of down years. And if that trend continues, that could end up being a problem for the Kings, and they won't be the improvements that they're supposed to be. But on the other side of things, if Danault and Arvidsson get somewhat back on track, at least, if not fully back on track, these are going to be two significant improvements to the forward group for the Los Angeles Kings and could have a really big impact on this team. The prospect pool for LA is absolutely loaded. This is one of the best prospect pools in the NHL. And if any of these guys are ready to make an impact, whether it's, a significant impact, whether it's Byfield, Turcotte, Kaliev, Madden, Kupari, Bjornfot or Clegg on the back end, if any of these young guys can step up and make a significant impact, the Kings are going to be a better team than what they were last season, and I certainly think that guys like Byfield and Kaliev and Turcotte are pretty much there. They're going to get a good chance to make the NHL roster this year and could really improve this team and inject some good young talent into this lineup, which will certainly help the Kings this coming season. So their prospect pool is absolutely outstanding, and all it's going to take is one or two of these guys to be ready to make a real impact at the NHL level, and you already have a better Kings team than what you had last year. And then the last thing that I really, really like about LA is their goaltender, Cal Petersen. Now, there's no doubt Jonathan Quick completely fallen off the map over the last 3 to 4 years. Nothing like he used to be. And it's not his team anymore. This is Cal Petersen's team. And over the last couple of years, Petersen has proven that he can put up some pretty good numbers. He can be a solid NHL goaltender. I certainly don't think he's going to be Vezina level or anything like that, but he can be a really solid starting goaltender. And if Cal Petersen has a solid year in net, LA can certainly be a third or fourth place team in that Pacific Division and can certainly have a shot at making the playoffs this year. So I think Petersen's really solid. I like the way he's played over the past couple years, and I really think he can be a guy that can get this team to the playoffs. So those are the positives with the Kings. Those are the reasons why I really do think that they could potentially make the playoffs this year and be a dark horse team that is better than people expect. But there are still definitely some questions with this team. Two things in particular that I really think could hold the Kings back and have them once again have an under 500 year, be down around 6th in the division, and not be a playoff team. One of the biggest questions for me is their defense. Their defense core is not great. Obviously, they still have Drew Doughty, who's their number one guy and leading the way. But Drew Doughty, over the past few years, has definitely declined. His numbers have certainly declined. And he's had a lot of issues with giving the puck away, a lot of turnovers. And then they're so heavily reliant on Drew Doughty because after that, they really don't have much. I mean, they added Alexander Edler this offseason in free agency. He's coming off a really bad year with Vancouver. Oli Mata only had 4 points last season. He's not really ever become the defenseman that he was supposed to be back when, he came up with Pittsburgh. And then they have got guys like Matt Roy, who I actually do like a lot. Sean Walker, who I do like a lot. But those two guys are solid, good defensemen, but they're not game-changing defensemen. They're guys that should be like a number 4 or number 5, not a guy that you should be relying on to play heavy top 4 minutes. But unfortunately, with this Kings D, they're probably going to be playing heavy top 4 minutes. Mikey Anderson, obviously still pretty young. Tobias Bjornfot, pretty young. Those guys are kind of up in the air. What are they going to be? Now, if some of these young guys step up and play bigger roles and really, take their game to the next level, then the Kings absolutely could have a much better defense than it seems on paper. But there's no guarantee of that happening, and there's certainly a lot of questions there still with this defense because they don't really have a number 2 defenseman. They have Drew Doughty, and then it's a big drop-off in kind of just the rest of the guys who all are kind of depth players. Edler, Mata, Roy, Walker, Anderson, these are all guys that should be depth guys in a lineup, not guys that you're heavily relying on. So they don't really have a number 2. You could argue they don't even really have a number 3. It's kind of the rest of their guys are all just kind of 4, 5, 6 type defensemen. And that's definitely going to be a question for this team. You know, is their defense good enough for them to make the playoffs? The other thing that I'm questioning is, you know, I talked about it on the positive sides, the young guys in the prospect pool. Well, what if they're not ready? If none of those guys are ready yet to really make that impact at the NHL level, then the Kings are going to be very similar to what they were last year. If they don't get that influx of young talent, they don't have somebody like a Byfield or a Turcotte or a Kaliev step up, then they're going to be pretty much where they were last year, and they're probably not going to be good enough to make the playoffs. So while the prospect pool is definitely a positive in my opinion about the Kings, it's also a question as far as this year is concerned because we don't know for sure if they're fully ready or not. Now, I think Byfield is ready to be a full-time NHLer. I think that Kaliev is probably ready to be a full-time NHLer, and Turcotte might be as well. And they don't need everybody to be ready. They just need really 1 or 2 of those guys in their prospect pool to be ready to have an impact at the NHL level. I think Byfield and at least 1 other guy probably is ready. But it's not a guarantee. They haven't proven it yet. They haven't shown it yet. They haven't played full seasons in the NHL yet, so there's still question marks. But I do lean towards at least a couple of those guys being ready. But if they're not, and if they struggle and they don't have that impact at the NHL level, then that is going to be a thing that will hold the LA Kings back and will be an issue for them this coming season. It's definitely a question heading into the year. So to me, the LA Kings definitely have a chance to be a dark horse team. Is it a guarantee? Absolutely not. There are still questions with this team. The D-core does not look very good on paper and really might be kind of the Achilles heel of this team this season. They're also going to be heavily relying on really young players to make significant impacts if they're going to take that next step. However, there's a lot of things I do like about this team. I like the additions of Danault and Arvidsson. Again, I think that some of these young guys are going to be ready to be, you know, a significant player at the NHL level. And the division that they play in is definitely a benefit because, again, you kind of have Vegas and then a whole bunch of mediocrity. All LA has to do is be one of the better mediocre teams, and they're going to have a legitimate shot to finish 3rd in the division and make the playoffs. So it's definitely a possibility that LA makes the postseason this year. It's far from a guarantee, though. There are still definite questions and things that could hold this team back, but I think that they definitely could be a dark horse and are definitely going to be a team to watch this coming season to see if they're going to be able to make that jump or not this year. So just kind of wanted to talk about the Kings a little bit. I think they're an interesting team, a fun team to look at heading into this year. And again, you know, there are definitely things that could keep them as an under 500 non-playoff team, but there are other things about this team that if they go well, you could see this team possibly stealing a playoff spot and being a lot better than most people are expecting this coming year. So we'll see what happens with the Kings. It's very much up in the air. It's very much a question, but I definitely think that the possibility is there. So with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon merchandise store, donation link, and memberships are in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.